Hello, everybody. Andy Jacob here with the Entrepreneur Spotlight Series, and we have a special guest as part of our Author Spotlight program going on. And we have a wonderful guest. You're going to want to tune in because this is going to be a good one. We have Mr. Peter Sekovski on the show today. He's the author of a book called Why They Hate Trump. And let me tell you, he has an amazing entrepreneurial journey. He's really helped so many companies as a decisive leader. He's got a nationally recognized track record of success. And he wrote this book, and it's getting all kinds of play out there. And we're very excited to have him on the show as he just released this book prior to probably him being booked up all around the world. So, Peter, thank you so much for coming on the Author Spotlight Series today.
My pleasure, Andy. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I mean, you wrote this book and, your whole career has been built on really helping companies. You're an entrepreneur. You've been involved with so many world-class companies throughout your years. Your own experience really has helped so many companies with win-win negotiations and really helping high-impact performers throughout the year. And here you are, you wrote this book, Why They Hate Trump. It's an interesting book. You've got some great insight. You've got some personal stories about some friends that you knew that kind of changed their dynamic after they heard that, you had a different point of view. And we want to talk about all that. But before we get going, you're also the CEO of Pelagian Media. And this is part of the media group. And this book is under that umbrella. Before we get going, why did you write the book?
So it was during Trump's, he just barely came down the escalator. He was still a candidate. He was just starting out. I was visiting friends in Los Angeles. We're sitting in the beautiful cafe outdoor, enjoying the lunch in Pasadena, just perfect weather, nice breeze, And I start chapter 1 writing about this. These are friends that I had known when we lived in LA for many years, that I had known for decades. Many of them in the entertainment business, music producers, TV producers, people involved in the Hollywood kind of lifestyle, and dear friends that I'd known for many years. And so I made the fatal mistake in my innocence and my naivete of saying, hey, guys, what do you think about Trump? And I was genuinely curious because it was a phenomenon. He just was starting. And I thought, you know what? Wondering what my boys have to say about it. And so immediately, one of my closer friends just blurted out, F Trump. And of course, he used the full word. And I was like taken back a little bit because it was with so much force. It wasn't just the heck with that guy or whatever, or rolling his eyes. It was a visceral, tangible anger that really caught me by surprise. And so I said, my friend's name is Kevin. I said, Kevin, whoa, man, slow down. Seriously, what do you guys think about? I was opening it up for discussion. I was curious. And again, he said, F Trump. And I'm like, okay, yep, I'm kind of smart. I got that the first time. I'm a good listener. And then I kind of changed my direction because I realized there was an irrational element to this that was foreign to me. And so I started going through my brain of, okay, what angle am I taking here? And I thought, okay, Kevin, what 3 policy proposals is he talking about that you despise so deeply? And once again, for the third time, same response, F Trump. And it was then that I realized, this is unusual. This is not normal discourse, especially amongst close friends. And it was something new. It was irrational. It was illogical. And I started to wonder why and what was happening. I thought about Obama. I wasn't a huge fan. I didn't vote for him, but I certainly didn't hate the man. I never dropped F-bombs when his name was in the same sentence. But here was Kevin, man, veins bulging and just angry, just hatred. And I thought, well, this is a phenomenon. So that was really what started piquing my curiosity.
Yeah, it's real interesting, Peter, because you're talking about this visceral response, and you're an intellectual, you're a high IQ individual. You want to have a conversation. You want to have a conversation with people. What is it about that conversation with your with your friend that really you think sparked such a strong reaction from him? It was sort of a guttural reaction. Maybe he wasn't interested in talking about policy or talking about the facts or talking about different points of view. It was just this thing that he said that was alarming to you and took you aback. Why do you think Trump represents such strong emotions and reactions?
Yeah, to understand that, I began to ponder, like, what's the anatomy of hatred? Where does hatred begin? What is it that causes hatred? And the the uh, the irrational aspect of it was really curious to me because it wasn't friends having a civil conversation. It wasn't even people that disagreed with it. We went from disagreement and having a diversity of thought to animosity, and I wasn't sure how we jumped that gap. So that was what started getting my wheels going, because there was such a strange element to this that I didn't recognize, and frankly, I'd never seen in my lifetime, especially towards a political candidate. And so, if it was just differences, it would be like, okay, Andy, you like Italian, I prefer Mexican, but we're not going to wrestle in the parking lot of the of the shopping mall, figuring out which restaurant we're going to go to for lunch. It's like, who cares? So the difference is what it was normally in a normal political climate. Yet somehow, literally from the minute he came down the escalator, it created this insanity and illogical and irrational aspect to it, and this animosity that went way beyond just respectful differences. Because, as you mentioned, I love to have I'm not an instigator, I'm not a provocateur, I'm not trying to stir up something. I'm literally just there with my friends, wanting to have a good conversation.
Yeah.
And it was a new phenomenon, but that phenomenon was overshadowed by the phenomenon of this intense hatred. And it was something that I started to write. So I started writing. I did a couple articles on LinkedIn. I did a chapter in an unrelated book that I was working on. And then that chapter turned into 2 chapters, 5, 8, 10. And I wasn't done. And then, long story short, volume 1 is out, and working on volume 2 and volume 3. And it was literally over 700 pages of this phenomenon of hatred geared and aimed at one man, and largely illogical and irrational. And again, just a phenomenon that I had never experienced in my life.
Yeah, it's interesting. This is part of a trilogy, of course. And the name of the book, Why They Hate Trump. So let's talk about it. Is it directed at Trump as the person or what he stands for? How do you put into your brain this visceral reaction that your friend or ex-friend had at the time you had the lunch with him? Was it just about Trump, or was it what he stood for?
Yeah, great question. Initially, that was when I was kind of pondering the anatomy of hatred towards this man. I'm like, well, what is it that's irking him, and what is it that's causing this reaction? And frankly, the weird thing and why it was so hard for me to be able to mine any facts on this is because they couldn't even articulate why. I mean, I literally asked my friend, who's a smart guy. He's I can't name the company he works for, but he's an executive, not a simple man by any stretch. And yet here he was, nonplussed. He couldn't even give me one, let alone 3 reasons why he had such hatred. So it's something where you have a lot of emotion, you have a lot of kind of weird negative energy, but you can't really nail down what exactly it is. So that was why I started pondering and writing, and then so in my books I do each one. So I have about 30 chapters. So I have the series of 3, which, if you feel like plowing through 700 pages, God love you. If at the end of that, I will do a condensed version, one book with 30 mini chapters, kind of a Reader's Digest version, where I will touch on each one. But it's like the topics are like that I discovered why they hate him, and then we'll get to who's the they as well. Is first of all, he's a businessman, so they hate him. And the one of the points was that he was a businessman. Well, anybody in business is inherently accountable. there's nobody, public or private corporation, or even a small mom and pop shop or whatever, where there isn't some level of accountability. You either have to look at your wife in the eye and explain why you thought it was a good idea to blow 10 grand on a marketing campaign when funds are short, or you have to answer to the board or shareholders. But there are mechanisms in place for intense accountability. And he brought that to DC. And I think that ruffled a lot of feathers. I think a lot of DC is just waste and fraud and abuse and silliness and spending like drunken sailors with little accountability, if any, which, of course, a lot of this is coming out in the news. So here he was, a man who came from a business background, a culture that demands results, a culture that is accountable, that creates an accountability structure. And so there was a certain group of people who really despised that. And so that's one thing. And then another thing is, I started to think, well, Democrats, of course, may hate him, but holy cow, I didn't anticipate the level of animosity. But that's kind of a given because they're supposedly the opponents or the opposition. But then you look at the Republican Party themselves, and I have a chapter titled "They Hate Him Because He Changed the Republican Party." And so, again, when you look at the anatomy of hatred, the reason hatred emerges is because there's a perceived or real threat. And so you have to ask yourself, what is the threat here? What threat does this man bring? And that's what I asked Kevin. How is it? You've never even met the man. It's not like he stole your dog or, ripped you off or, hijacked your car. I mean, what? It's insanity. And so inside the Republican Party, he changed the party. That created a lot of animosity just within the party, friendly fire, so to say. And so you have senators and you have leadership in Congress, and they were all kind of they got their feathers ruffled because here was this man who was making big changes.
Yeah, it makes sense. Of course, you mentioned you wanted to have a conversation with Kevin, and this makes me think of a story not too long ago, just a few months ago. My wife, Kristen, and I were at a coffee shop, and we went outside, and there were 6 young 14 and 15-year-old boys sitting around a table. And Peter, they weren't talking. There was no communication going on. They were all on their phones. They were all looking at their TikTok or their social or their Instagram. They were laughing to themselves. They weren't really sharing anything. Maybe they were sharing it online on their phone, but they weren't talking or looking each other in the eye. And I think in today's world, what used to be common sense, we look each other in the eye, we shake each other's hands, we have a conversation. Maybe we don't agree, but we have a conversation, and we try and learn the viewpoint of the other person. Maybe you try and convince or persuade the other person about your viewpoint, but it's civil. And it seems like a lot of that's gone by the wayside. Have you seen that in your career up till, now, speaking with your friends?
Well, that's a large element of this phenomenon, because we have almost a primal tribal mass psychosis thing going on, and it's reinforced by what I call the leftist media, and which Trump, of course, calls fake news, which drives them crazy. But I have a chapter in that. They hate him because he called them fake news. And so for the first time, you had a candidate going, hey, you know what? That's not accurate. And it's no secret that the vast majority of media and all of the so-called legacy or mainstream media are really against the man, including late night comics, including talk shows, including actual news anchors. And so when they start having that biased opinion and then propagating that through social media, through websites, through the dissemination of news or so-called news, when the Harvard study came out, it was I think, if I recall correctly, 95% negative coverage of Trump in his first 100 days in his first administration. That's not exactly balanced. That's not exactly objective. That's not exactly unbiased. That's at the level of propaganda. That's the stuff that we would have seen in Lenin communism in the early 20th century. where you have Pravda, the communist paper or news outlet, media outlet, that just said everything according to the given or the approved narrative or propaganda. So when people are on their phones and depending on what they're listening to or watching, yeah, it can really be uh, I don't want to say brainwashing, but I think it strips people of the ability to think critically. And then if you don't think critically anymore, if you just agree and say, okay, cool, yeah, big government's better, more taxes better, everything better, cutting down on free speech better, whatever, uh, your brain kind of gets a little foggy at that point, and it's real hard to have a conversation with someone like that who is becoming manipulated by inaccurate information that's not factual, but then stirs and provokes emotion. And we've seen this time and time again. Any crisis, real or manufactured, that emerges in the news cycle, it's all in this vein.
Yeah, Peter, it's really interesting. Of course, in your own life, you've had a lot of leadership success. You have a very unique experience. Your father escaped communism, communist Yugoslavia. It's not called Yugoslavia anymore, but he eventually landed in America, and this was really the place of his dreams. And I would imagine that being raised by parents from two different countries, your father escaping communism, that sort of puts your brain and your mind and your emotions in a different kind of a sort of thinking process. So what could you say about that? The way you were raised, how did that, intertwining of the cultures of your parents really sort of mold you to be the person you are today?
Yeah. And my mom is from Sweden, which of course is very socialist. Um, and so when you grow up in that culture, especially my father was much more intense, having literally escaping communism as a 17-year-old boy. I'm a junior in high school at that age. I'm wrestling, I'm playing football, I'm winking at the cheerleaders. Like, how serious can your life be? And this guy's running for his life, literally. Ended up in a refugee camp in Athens for 3 years, and eventually went to Sweden, met my mom, and the rest is history. Landed in New York and settled down in eventually in Buffalo because the factories were there manufacturing, and he was able to get a job and continue to learn English and embrace the American dream. So depending on how you're raised, you are able to, I call it smell. You can kind of smell, it'd be like, can you imagine Gordon Ramsay's kids eating in a restaurant? Like,
Yeah.
you don't think they could smell, a bad chef or a bad server or poor management? I mean, they're going to look around and go, this place is run by jokers. Like, what kind of an outfit? Or they'd be like, wow, this is a first class spot. And I'm looking at my dad, and he's enjoying his escargot, and mom's enjoying the scallops, and this is really great. So depending on how you're raised, the background, your culture, even in the criminal element, if back in the good old New York days, if you're raised in a mafia family or a criminal family, let's say you are no longer in that vein as an adult, but you can kind of smell it a mile away. And so for me, I recognize the tactics. I recognize the manipulation of information. I recognize when media has been co-opted and turned into a manipulative propaganda outlet for the Democrat Party versus what we used to have in the good old Walter Cronkite days, where it was just the news, ma'am, just the facts, and then we create our own opinions on it. Now, the news is communicated to us through the lens of a given and assumed opinion instead of just the information. So that's a major tactic of all communist regimes, from Mao to Lenin to Stalin to you name it. That's just how they begin to work the people and manipulate society.
Yeah, Peter, you mentioned about the Gordon Ramsay story. That's interesting. Kristen and I last week went to a wonderful restaurant. It'll be a Michelin star restaurant very soon. And we ate, and I love food. I don't know food like Gordon Ramsay's children, but I know business.
Right.
And when we got done with that meal, I asked the sommelier if I could speak with the chef, and he said sure. And the chef came out to say hello to us. And the chef was expecting me to talk about his food, and I didn't talk about the food. I said, Chef, I said, the food was fantastic, but I know business. And your people are so well trained, everybody from the front desk receptionist to the person that was bringing us our water, to the servants, to the servers, to everybody else. You run a tight ship. Congratulations. And I think that really resonated for him because it came from a business perspective. And I think what you mentioned about Trump, he comes from a business perspective as well, which is very interesting. If we think about it, I believe what you're saying. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you want to have good, solid, open dialogue with people. Whatever side they're on, whatever side you're on, you believe that it's about having conversation in an intellectual way instead of this emotional, guttural response that your friend or ex-friend had at the time. Am I
Right.
seeing this clearly?
Yeah, 100%. And furthermore, with such levels of animosity and emotion, raw emotion, it's impossible to have a civil, logical conversation. I've tried. I can't tell you how many times I've tried. Whether I'm just wrapping up a round of golf and sitting in the clubhouse and happen to start chatting with the guy next to me, and all of a sudden you just see it in their eyes. They just kind of change. It's like, I call it the Hulk. The veins start popping, they turn green, and I'm like, holy cow! What we can't have a conversation? You can't explain to me why you feel and think the way you do, and because I'm perfectly logical. I'm not emotional about Trump. I've never met the man. I just look at the policy, and a lot of people got hung up on his personality instead of his policy. A lot of people misunderstood him because, frankly, a lot of people don't understand New York culture. New York culture is is a very unique place. It's snarky, it's sarcastic, it's cynical, it's aggressive. Um, we speak in superlatives and exaggerated tones and words and say things we don't really 100% mean, but try to get a rise out of you, maybe just to see what's going on, And
Yeah.
it's like a lot of people, I think, flipped out because they just misinterpreted this New York guy, this kid from Queens, who grew up in a construction family and then, of course, still remain in a construction family. And that's the other part of it. You're not talking to a banker. You're not talking to a hedge fund guy. You're not talking to a corporate CEO in the purest sense. You're talking about a white collar guy over a blue collar industry. That's an entirely different temperament and mindset. And so, I really wish I could have fair conversations. And you you keep saying ex-friend, and I haven't told you that, but yeah, you're right. I no longer, and I'm talking about 10, 15 very close friends back in Los Angeles. I've lost all of them. Not because I'm anything, but simply because of this issue. And I have spoken to dozens, if not hundreds of people across the country in various places and positions in life, different ages, and virtually everybody has the same uh, experience. And I mean, sadly, I have one Democrat friend left, Paul, and I love him like an adopted uncle. He was my mentor. He started me out in business back in New York. A wonderful man. His wife was my third grade math teacher. I mean, we go way back,
Wow.
and he's the last guy left. And I don't know the next time I visit home whether we're going to knock heads. But when he flew to a city where I happened to be and we had dinner with our spouses, he dominated the whole conversation with how much he hated Trump.
Right.
And so, I saw his wife kind of elbowing him, because it kind of got heated, and it's just a very, very interesting phenomenon.
Well, every time he said that, he gave you a little free publicity and a free marketing for your book, Why They Hate Trump. Now, you talked about the 19th hole. You get done with a round of golf. You have somebody, in the lounge or at the 19th hole bar, and they blow up. What's the one thing that critics of Trump often get wrong, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it has to do, and I have a chapter titled "The Hate Trump Deserves." Because frankly, I think he unnecessarily attracts fire, both from friends and from enemies. I think in some ways he is his worst own enemy, and I think that's probably true for a lot of us. And so, I say that with a grain of salt, because for all the good, okay, he's a New York guy, he's a construction guy. The Apprentice, show, he's used to firing people and being the big boss, and fantastic. That's great. But I think people fundamentally get wrong. Here's a man, and I have a chapter titled that he's an America First guy. That's literally his thing. And I'm like, how are you going to argue with me about a president who wants to put America first? How is that foreign to you? How is that weird to you? Well, if you're okay with sending billions around the world to crazy places that most people can't find on a map, and if you're okay with starting wars that go on forever that accomplish little, if you're kind of a certain mindset, if you're a globalist, if whatever even that means, everything means three different things to three different people. So you're going to have an opinion about that. But I'm like, America first. Look, there isn't a father that over a family. There isn't a husband with a wife. There isn't a CEO over a company. There isn't an HOA president or an elementary school PTA president that doesn't primarily and first of all think of their constituents. That's so fundamental and so intuitive and so basic. I don't know why that would be in the least bit confusing to people. I mean, even with all the tariffs, as soon as he announced that, fundamentally I knew it was just a negotiation tactic. That's Trump 101. And these are all the things that people kind of misinterpret. They take him literally at his word. He's not a literal guy. He has his own flavor of communication. And, he's not afraid of a fight. He's not afraid of a street fight. He's a New York guy. And if you don't understand that culture, if you get goofed up with the personality, if you don't focus on the policies and the good that's coming from that, if you don't understand that America First is an amazing thing, you're gonna get a lot of things wrong.
Yeah, I like it. Of course, even in the book, You're Fair, you have a chapter and you talk about what you feel he's doing wrong, so people can really get inspired by the fact that you're fair-minded in writing the book. Now, I want to talk about entrepreneurship. I was very excited to ask you this following question when I knew you were going to come on the show, and thank you very much. I mean, to write a book and get it out there and have it part of a trilogy. I mean, a lot of people think about writing a book. They sit down and they write the first line, they write the title, and then that's it. It gets, dusted off for 20 years. It never gets done, but you actually got it done. Now, let's talk about entrepreneurship, because we have younger entrepreneurs watching the show. You have children yourself. And for the younger entrepreneurs that are hitting a tough time, maybe they're freezing in the frame, Peter, maybe they don't know what to do. Maybe they're thinking about quitting. Sometimes, of course, quitting is the right thing to do if you've pivoted and, you just can't get it done. But for those entrepreneurs that need a little inspiration, a little motivation to keep on going, what would you say to them, Peter, based on your background and experience?
Well, there's all the standard advice that I would give like anybody else: tenacity, believing in yourself, all the stuff that I jokingly call American Idol or America's Got Talent, judges comments, dreams can come true, just believe in yourself, and sure, sometimes you lose everything and you hate your life for 10 years until you get back on your feet. Right. And so I think the best advice I can give, I remember 2000s, and I had I was in real estate. I was top 6% sales in the nation as a broker. I was getting ready to launch my own firm. I had a property management company and I had a construction company. And we were all in real estate in that basket as much as anybody could be. I had my own rentals, managed other people's rentals. And guess what? 08, 09 came, and wow, you talk about getting kicked in the teeth. So I think instead of the America's Got Talent, American Idol kind of believe in your dreams and hope and unicorns and puppies and rainbows, which of course I'm all for that. But the counter to that is if you really fully are entrenched in that mentality, when the winds blow, when the waves rise, when the storm comes in, you're going to be devastated because you never once considered there might be a downside to this. So I think, and it's beyond risk mitigation. It's beyond understanding your competition and knowing threats. It's a deep thing in your core that you have to really grasp and say, well, you know, what's a perfect example? I'll conclude with this on this thought. When you look at the Department of Defense, the American Eagle, that's on the back of coins and on many the logo for the government.
Yes.
You'll see in one hand there's holly, it looks like ivy, and in the other claw is arrows. And so the motto is hope for the holly, ready with the arrows. In other words, of course, hope for peace, but you're ready with the arrows. And I learned that very early on as a young man and have kept that really close to my heart anytime I've done anything, because of course we all hope for the holly. Nobody launches anything and says, gosh, I hope I'm out of business like 85% of small businesses within 18 months. That's my dream. You know, I hope I take a second on my house and lose everything. That's cool. You know, nobody does that. And so, no, hope for the holly. Be optimistic. Be relentless. Believe in yourself. All that good stuff. But be ready with the arrows. Be ready to understand that real estate, I did nothing wrong. The entire market, the Fed decisions, everything, the lenders, everything that was outside of my purview and outside of my authority or influence or control hit me like a hurricane raging out of the ocean. And there was nothing we could do except manage the downside. And so you have to have both. Is it 50-50? No, I hope it's 90-10, hope for the holly, ready with the arrows. But that's a real important key.
I love it. After the trilogy's done, I can see that being your next book, Hope for the Holly, Be Ready for the Arrows, or Be Ready with the Arrows. I love that. I'm going to steal that from the back of the coin and start using that myself, Peter. I mean, this has been a great interview. Why They Hate Trump. It's available on Amazon. Check it out. He's doing a great job. We'll see you on the speaking circuit out and about. There's another picture of the book. We're going to put some pictures of the book throughout the interview as well. We'll put the links below the interview. Peter, I want to thank you so much for coming on the Entrepreneur Spotlight series, focusing on this book that you've written as part of our Author Spotlight series. And thank you again for being on the show.
Andy, thanks so much for your time. This has been great.